First, NASA says its Voyager 1 probe, the most distant human-made object in the universe.
Voyager 1, built with the fragile tools of the 1970s, was never meant to speak beyond its mission.
4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition and we have liftoff.
It was made to leave, not to return. For decades, it obeyed, carrying its silent memory through the dark between stars. 15 billion miles from Earth, where the sun is only a fading dot, it drifted with no one watching.
Voyager 1 is 46 years old and over 15 billion miles away now.
And then, without warning, something shifted. A signal arrived that should not exist. A voice in the void, quiet but deliberate.
And finally, NASA on Tuesday said that it has found a heartbeat signal from the Voyager 2 probe.
It did not echo Earth, nor any star. It came from nowhere. And in that moment, nothing felt impossible anymore. The machine that was built to leave. On the morning of September 5th, 1977, a slender craft rose quietly from Cape Canaveral. It wasn't built with luxury or strength. It was simple, fragile, and light, designed for a single journey. Inside it hummed a power source no larger than a human heart, a plutonium core releasing just 800 watts of electricity, the same as a kitchen microwave. Its memory could not hold even a single photo from a modern phone. Yet, this fragile machine was trusted with a path no one had ever walked before. The plan was direct: pass by Jupiter, gather images, pass by Saturn, send back what it saw, then continue, carrying no more instructions than leave. It was not meant to wander with purpose. It was not built to turn back or to listen. Its role was escape, and it obeyed. It raced through the solar system with a kind of silence that seemed endless. It photographed Jupiter's storms, Saturn's rings, and then it kept going, past Uranus, past Neptune, far beyond Pluto's lonely orbit. Every mile took it closer to nothing. Every year carried it deeper into the dark. In 2012, the impossible milestone came. Voyager crossed the invisible threshold called the heliopause, the line where the sun's breath fades and interstellar space begins. No other human-made object had reached so far. On the other side was emptiness, a sea of silence, a stretch of black unclaimed by planets, stars, or magnetic fields. And so it drifted. No resistance, no gravity to hold it, no sunlight to guide it. Just a machine from the 1970s, older than most who remembered it, slipping into the endless quiet. For years, it floated, untouched, until the quiet broke. The shift in the void. Interstellar space is not what most imagine. It isn't a place filled with light or hidden planets. It is emptiness stretched to infinity, where even the closest stars seem frozen in place. Out here, the sun is nothing more than a dim spark in a black ocean. There is no warmth, no wind, no pull. Gravity barely whispers. Light travels endlessly, but even it feels weaker, spread too thin to hold meaning. Voyager drifted into this realm without resistance. It should have kept its antenna pointed toward Earth, locked firmly in place, obedient to its original design. Nothing in this void should have touched it. Nothing should have called it to turn. Yet, it did. One day, without command, without signal, without reason, Voyager shifted. Its orientation changed, slowly but deliberately, as if something unseen had reached out and turned its face. The antenna is no longer aimed at Earth. It no longer obeyed the path given to it. Instead, it pointed into a section of sky that, by every chart and every record, was blank. No star shone there, no galaxy lingered, no cluster pulled its weight, only blackness. This made no sense. Voyager was never built to react to its environment. It had no software to detect a direction, no hardware to adjust its aim without orders. For decades, it had followed commands written long ago, unchanging. And then, in a place where nothing should exist, it turned as though it had found something worth listening to. The movement was not random. The antenna held steady, locked on the empty patch like it was fixed on purpose. And in that silence, 15 billion miles from Earth,
after months of spouting gibberish. The spaceship left the solar system in 2012 and is currently more than 15 billion miles from Earth.
The impossible had begun. Something out there had made Voyager shift. The glitch that wasn't a glitch. On November 6th, 2023, a strange signal reached Earth from Voyager 1. At first glance, it looked like ordinary static. The stream was faint, broken, and twisted, almost like a tape played backward. Engineers assumed the usual problems. The craft was old, its circuits weathered by decades of deep space radiation. Glitches were expected. But this was different. The distortion had form. It was too regular, too patterned, to dismiss as noise. And then something even stranger happened. Voyager's safety systems suddenly came alive. Those systems exist for only one reason: to save the craft in moments of danger. If a thruster misfires, if it spins out of control, or if contact with Earth is lost, the protections take over. They are not meant to wake without cause. Yet, here they were, active and urgent, triggered by nothing anyone could explain. Telemetry, the lifeline of any spacecraft, turned unreadable. Orientation logs vanished as though erased. Even the clocks, the one thing meant to stay steady, began to drift. Seconds no longer matched Earth. Time itself seemed to bend inside the probe. This was no ordinary malfunction. A normal glitch degrades, fades, or breaks. This one behaved like a reaction, as if Voyager had been touched by something invisible. The signal grew stranger, morphing into shapes that refused to match the models on Earth. The team ran tests. They tried to explain it as aging hardware, as memory corruption, as damage no one could see, but the numbers refused to fit. Every explanation failed. Voyager was not dying. It was behaving as if it had been answered. The torque event. After the strange data came another surprise. Voyager's gyroscopes recorded a shift, a real rotation. This wasn't a drift or a blur in the numbers. The probe had physically turned. It was small, but it was there, written clearly in the instruments. The problem was simple. Nothing should have caused it. The thrusters had not fired. No jets of gas had been used. The log showed zero activity. And out here, 15 billion miles away, the sun was far too weak for its light to push the spacecraft. Solar pressure was gone. NASA checked every possibility. Could a grain of space dust have struck it? Number. The impact required for such a turn would have left scars in the readings, but none appeared. Could it have been a burst of radiation? Again, no. There were no spikes, no storms, nothing unusual in the cosmic background. And yet, the craft had rotated. Not wildly, not in chaos, just a gentle adjustment, as though guided by an unseen hand. For the first time, engineers stopped asking if the system had failed. They began asking something far stranger. What if the movement wasn't an accident? What if it had been intentional? Machines do not choose. Probes do not decide. But the torque event looked less like a stumble and more like a nudge, a correction not meant to harm, only to point. Voyager, the silent traveler, had been steered, and the place it now faced was not random at all. The null zone. When the new orientation was mapped, its direction puzzled everyone. The antenna was locked onto an area of sky that astronomers had little reason to study. It was blank. No star fields, no nearby galaxies, no clouds of dust or gas, just darkness, empty and ordinary. But as the data came together, something curious emerged. The angle of Voyager's antenna lined up with a theoretical region scientists sometimes whispered about, a place where gravity cancels itself out, where the pull of distant stars, scattered in every direction, balances perfectly. A point of nothing, a pocket of calm in the chaos. These null zones were thought of as math more than reality. They were written in papers, modeled in equations, but never found in practice. Voyager had no tools to seek them out. It had no sensors to measure gravitational balance. And yet, Here it was, turned precisely toward one. The craft held its position as if it had been anchored. No wobble, no drift. Its antenna remained fixed, like it was waiting for something. It didn't turn back toward Earth. It didn't resume its old path. It simply stayed, pointing into silence. For the engineers, the question deepened. Why would a spacecraft from the 1970s, built without the ability to detect such a place, find itself aligned with one? Why there, of all places, in the endless sky? The more they studied the numbers, the more it felt deliberate. Not a chance. Not an accident. The void Voyager faced was not just empty. It was a direction. The plasma melody. Not long after the reorientation, Voyager's plasma wave instrument detected something it had never heard before. The readings weren't jagged bursts of interference or the faint echoes of cosmic rays. Instead, the probe picked up a steady tone. It held firm at around 3,000 hertz, smooth, unbroken, too clean to be natural static. And it wasn't random noise. The signal pulsed with rhythm. The intervals repeated like the steps of a song. Some pauses returned at perfect distances, rises and falls that echoed each other, shapes too symmetrical to be dismissed. The scientists called it the plasma melody. To them, it looked less like turbulence and more like a composition. Numbers folded back on themselves, creating loops that mirrored each other. The sound felt balanced, crafted, almost like a language hidden inside the hum. Acoustic experts were brought in, people who spent their lives working with structure and harmony. Nearly all of them said the same thing. This didn't behave like chaos. It behaved like music. It had patience, design, and intention. But the most unsettling part wasn't that the melody existed. It was that it had always been there. Voyager hadn't created it. The shift in orientation had simply placed the probe in the one position where the sound became clear. For decades, the tone had waited in the dark, hidden until the antenna pointed straight toward it.
It's probing the space between the stars. No other craft have been able to do this, and it's going to be many decades before we get another craft to have a look at what's going on beyond the sun's influence.
It was not sent like a broadcast. It was uncovered, as if it had been lying in silence for anyone to find, if only they knew where to look. Data inside the signal. When the melody was pulled apart, it revealed something stranger than sound. Hidden in the stream was information, not the usual temperature logs or radiation counts that Voyager was built to send. This was different. The data carried strings of numbers that looked deliberate, sequences of primes, recursive loops that folded endlessly inward, patterns shaped like fractals, repeating themselves at smaller and smaller scales. Some values even matched known constants, the speed of light, the ratio of pi, and gravitational signatures, but written with precision far beyond what Voyager's tired instruments could measure. The probe did not have the hardware to gather such detail. It could not have built these formulas. The information seemed to be placed inside the signal, riding Voyager's transmission like a hidden passenger. On Earth, engineers were unsettled. It was as though the probe had become a vessel for someone else's message, a courier carrying words it had never been taught to write. The formatting didn't match any existing software. It wasn't binary, Morse, or any known programming language. It looked closer to raw logic than text, a structure written in mathematics itself, compressed into patterns the probe could unknowingly send home. Even stranger, none of the entries existed in Voyager's memory. The data had not been recorded on board. It had simply appeared, embedded in the outgoing signal, without any trace of how it got there. The conclusion was unsettling. Voyager hadn't just stumbled into sound. It had been used. Something had placed its own code inside the transmission and sent it directly to Earth. The old probe had become more than a traveler. It had become a messenger. The halo in the dark. After the strange transmission, astronomers on Earth turned their instruments toward the same region Voyager now faced. At first, nothing appeared. The sky looked blank, exactly as the charts had always shown. But as the hours stretched into days, faint changes began to emerge. Sensitive infrared arrays picked up a glow. It was so dim it almost slipped beneath detection, flickering like a candle at the edge of sight, and it did not stay steady. The glow brightened, then faded, pulsing softly, as if it followed a rhythm of its own. Weeks of observation revealed something stranger. The flicker seemed to respond to solar flares. When the sun erupted with a burst of charged particles, the glow echoed back seconds later, shimmering faintly in sync. It was not a perfect reflection, not simultaneous, but timed as if it were listening and answering. There was no dust cloud scattering light. There was no star hidden in the distance. The glow behaved too deliberately, too alive. Its edges blurred like a halo, never still, as though shifting between presence and absence. For the scientists, it was a revelation. Voyager hadn't turned toward anything. It had turned toward this. A light was invisible until instruments focused sharply on it, a signal written not only in sound, but in faint glimmers across the void. What made it most unsettling was its patience. The halo did not blaze or announce itself. It waited quietly in silence, as if it had always been there, only revealing itself when attention finally arrived. Voyager had pointed to a place the sky had kept hidden. Now Earth was staring back. The silence and the return. Then came the most unsettling moment of all. After weeks of strange behavior, Voyager stopped speaking. For 12 hours, there was nothing. No faint tone, no telemetry, no heartbeat of the machine. The signal vanished completely, as if the probe had been swallowed by the dark. At first, engineers hesitated. A few hours of silence might be normal for an aging craft so far from home, but this was different. Voyager had survived radiation storms, dust impacts, and decades of distance. Its voice had weakened at times, but it had never disappeared entirely. This was the first true blackout. The world's largest antennas strained against the void, listening for even the faintest trace. None came. For 12 long hours, it was as if Voyager did not exist. And then, just as suddenly, it returned. The probe's signal reappeared, strong and clear, but something about it had changed. The internal clock no longer matched Earth. It had reset itself completely, as though time had begun again inside the spacecraft. The telemetry carried data that didn't belong. The patterns looked sharper, cleaner, as if the probe had been renewed. There were no signs of repair, no commands sent from Earth, but Voyager felt altered, as if it had passed briefly through a place with different rules and come back carrying the weight of it. For the team, one thought lingered. Silence can mean absence, but it can also mean crossing into something else. And Voyager's silence had not been empty. It had been an encounter. The background knows. When the strange signal was examined more closely, it became clear that it carried more than numbers. It was layered, like something written in different voices at once. Traditional computers could not make sense of it. They reduced the stream to endless strings of symbols, patterns that hinted at order, but refused to settle into meaning. So the team tried something new. They used a quantum processor, one that worked not step by step, but through probability and symmetry. Unlike older machines, it could see recursion and mirrored shapes as logic rather than noise. Slowly, the signal unfolded. Loops bent back like sentences with grammar, sequences repeated with precision. At last, one output appeared, a question. Are you ready to listen? It was not loud. It was not complex. It was simple, waiting, almost patient. To those who studied it, the message felt less like a broadcast and more like a reply.
For 4 months, scientists and engineers gently prod and examine Voyager 1, testing theory after theory and trying to come up with a solution that fixes things without causing any further damage in the process.
Voyager had not stumbled upon a call sent to the universe. It had triggered something by arriving, and that something had spoken back. Beneath the decoded layer, another secret hid, a pure tone, locked at 30,000 hertz. It was unwavering, tuned as if by intention. When broken apart, it revealed rests and intervals like music. Scales rose and fell with symmetry. Palindromes echoed both forward and backward. It was not static. It was a composition. And then, suddenly, it ended. No fade, no distortion, only silence. Cut sharp, like a switch had been turned off. To the scientists, It was haunting, not only because it sounded like music written in numbers, but because it carried restraint. Whoever or whatever shaped it had chosen not just to begin, but also to stop, as if the answer had been given, and the rest depended on us. Music beyond silence. At first, many thought Voyager had simply caught a distant transmission, a voice from somewhere far away, carried on the void. But the timing told another story. The anomalies began only when the probe entered that silent stretch of space. The signal did not drift to meet it. The response came after Voyager was already there. It was less like hearing a broadcast and more like knocking on a door. Something had been waiting, and when touched, it replied. The reply was not random. It was measured, balanced, and almost gentle. A hum shaped with symmetry, data folded into music, as though the void itself had been prepared to answer without threat, only with recognition. Voyager had not discovered silence, it had been noticed. NASA's public voice spoke calmly of signal anomalies, but behind the curtain, fear stirred. Teams were recalled, old engineers returned, simulations ran endlessly. The truth they whispered was not about failure. Voyager had worked beyond its design. It had found something, or been found. And that quiet truth unsettled them more than silence ever could. Voyager 1 was built to leave. It was never meant to return, never meant to listen. Yet in the silent gulf between stars, it found something waiting. A sound, a pattern, a question. For 12 hours, it vanished. And when it came back, it was changed. The data was sharper, the signal stronger, the silence broken. Perhaps the universe had been listening all along. Perhaps it had been waiting for us to reach far enough, long enough, to finally hear its answer. And now, the question remains: are we ready to respond?